He shared his last meal, then something amazing happened. Have you ever given something away when you barely had enough for yourself? Most people help when they have plenty. But what happens when someone chooses kindness during their own hardest moment? Today's story is about a man who had almost nothing left, yet he shared his last meal with a stranger. What happened next changed his life forever. Let's begin. David was a simple man living in a small town. Life had not been easy for him. A year earlier, he had lost his job when the factory where he worked suddenly closed down. Since then, he had spent months searching for work. Every morning, he woke up early and walked from place to place, asking if anyone needed help. Every evening, he returned home disappointed. His savings slowly disappeared. The bills piled up. Some days, he skipped meals just to save a little money. Yet despite everything, David tried to stay positive. He often told himself, as long as I keep going, something good will happen. But deep inside, he was tired. Very tired. One cold evening, David checked his wallet. There were only a few coins left. Just enough to buy one simple meal. Nothing more. He walked to a small food stall near the bus station. The smell of warm food filled the air. David ordered the cheapest meal available. As he sat on a bench holding the food in his hands, he felt both grateful and sad. Grateful because he had something to eat. Sad because he didn't know where his next meal would come from. He looked at the food carefully. This was all he had. His stomach growled loudly. He was about to take the first bite when he noticed someone nearby. An old man sat alone on another bench. His clothes were worn out. His hands trembled slightly. And his eyes were fixed on David's food. The old man looked hungry. Very hungry. David quickly looked away. He told himself not to think about it. After all, this was his meal. His only meal. But every time he looked up, he saw the old man sitting there quietly. The man wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't begging. He was simply hungry. David felt a battle inside his heart. One voice said, "You need this food." Another voice said, "That man needs it too." For several moments, he sat there in silence. Then he sighed deeply. Slowly, he stood up and walked toward the old man. "Sir," David said gently, "would you like to share this meal with me?" The old man's eyes widened. For a moment, he seemed unable to speak. Then a small smile appeared on his face. "Thank you," he whispered. The two men sat together and shared the meal. It wasn't much. But somehow, it felt enough. As they ate, they talked. The old man shared stories about his life. David spoke about losing his job. For the first time in many months, David felt understood. When the meal was finished, the old man looked at him and smiled. "You have a good heart," he said. David laughed softly. "A good heart doesn't pay the bills." The old man smiled again. "Maybe not today. But kindness always finds its way back." David thanked him and prepared to leave. Before walking away, the old man shook his hand firmly. Then he disappeared into the crowd. David never expected to see him again. The next morning, David woke up as usual. He had no job, no money, and no clear future. Still, he got dressed and went out looking for work. Hours passed. Nothing. One rejection after another. As the afternoon sun began to set, his phone suddenly rang. David almost ignored it. But something told him to answer. "Hello." A voice on the other end spoke. "Is this David?" "Yes. We received your application a few months ago. Are you still looking for work?" David's heart skipped a beat. Yes, absolutely. We would like to meet you tomorrow for an interview. David couldn't believe it. After months of waiting, someone had finally called. The next day, he arrived early. The office building was larger than any place he had ever worked before. His hands shook with nervousness. A receptionist greeted him and asked him to wait. A few minutes later, a manager entered the room. David followed him into an office. Then something unexpected happened. Sitting behind the desk was the old man from the bus station. David froze. His eyes widened. The old man smiled warmly. "It's nice to see you again." David couldn't believe what he was seeing. The old man wasn't homeless. He wasn't a beggar. He was actually the founder of the company. David stood there speechless. The old man invited him to sit down. "I often visit the city without anyone knowing who I am," he explained. "I like to see how people treat others when they think nobody is watching." David listened carefully. The old man continued. "Yesterday, you shared your last meal with a stranger." David looked down. It wasn't much. The old man shook his head. "It was everything you had." Silence filled the room. Then the old man said something David would never forget. "Skills can be taught. Experience can be gained. But character is rare." A tear formed in David's eye. The old man smiled. "We need people like you in this company." Right there, David was offered a job. A good job. One that paid enough to rebuild his life. One that gave him hope again. As David walked out of the building that day, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Gratitude. And a deep understanding of something important. The meal he shared had seemed small. Almost meaningless. But that simple act of kindness had opened a door he never expected. Years later, David became one of the most respected employees in the company. Whenever new workers joined, he shared his story. Not because of the job. Not because of the success. But because of the lesson. A lesson he wanted everyone to remember. You never know what someone else is going through. You never know who is watching. And you never know how one small act of kindness can change a life. Including your own. So if you ever find yourself with a choice between keeping everything for yourself or helping someone in need, remember David. Remember that kindness is not measured by how much you give. It is measured by how much it costs you to give it. Sometimes the smallest act can create the biggest change. And sometimes, the miracle you are waiting for begins the moment you decide to help someone else. Thank you for listening. And remember, a kind heart never loses. It always finds its reward, even if it arrives in a way you never expected.